is part two. We did the part one on Juneteenth. And instead of really thinking about Juneteenth as a historical event that happened a couple hundred years ago, almost at this point, we wanted to really think about how the legacy of Juneteenth continues today. What were the struggles, and how have artists, visual artists, captured that sense of the struggle for equality and freedom. And we found so many pieces of art that we decided to do a second part to it. And so some of the artwork is from the Black Power movement period, which is from the 1960s to the 1970s. Some of the art is contemporary, and the music follows that same suit, where we mixed in protest music or just music where artists are responding to lack of representation, lack of equality from the 60s, 70s, and then zooming up to even today. And so we hope you enjoy the selection. As usual, we will have some really lively conversations. It's my favorite. I just love this program. I love the audience that we have.
Me too. The first piece is this one. Yeah. And let's play the music. Yeah. What do folks think?
So Anthony writes that that was MLK's favorite song. Right. So of course, that's actually James Baldwin singing that, and he's featured prominently in this particular piece. So, this is Ming Smith, a really interesting artist. She's the first Black woman to have a piece bought by MoMA in New York, and studied with Roy DeCarava. She was the first woman in the Cominge collective that was in New York, and was really influenced by him, as well as other really important photographers like Gordon Parks, like Versailles, like Diane Arbus. But this is such an interesting piece. She does a lot of superimpositions, double exposures. She will actually paint onto her photographs as well. So this has a real surrealistic view to it. If you look at it really, really carefully, some of those very, very ominous looking clouds are actually photographs of James Baldwin. You can see there's 1, 2, 3 of them that I can easily recognize, and he's sort of just hovering over New York, if you will. And it's a very moody, evocative piece. On the one hand, those clouds can be really, really ominous and fear-evoking. On the other hand, they're also this idea, they just kind of hover like a stew over Harlem, which is where Baldwin was so important and played such a role. Grace, did you have some thoughts or comments about this piece?
I just absolutely love this piece. The fact that she chose James Baldwin to hover over Harlem is just amazing. For me, it evokes a feeling of an ancestor who is watching over, the place where he was born, and it's just magnificent how she just takes his photo and just kind of places it right there in the clouds in that manner. And this, is actually her style of photography. As you say, she does a lot of painting and adds other kinds of things into her photography. She is so just underknown, I guess is what I would say, because she's gone for approximately 40 years without any kind of recognition other than the MoMA recognition. It was expected that her being the first African American photographer to have her work acquired by MoMA, that she would have been a popular photographer, but yet nothing happened with that. It just kind of like that happened, and then 40 years, it was like she no longer even existed. And I just think that is a travesty, given the wondrousness of her work. She is very into the shadow and light, and looks at it as poetry. And as a matter of fact, she says, in the art of photography, I'm dealing with light, and I'm dealing with all of these elements, getting that precise moment, getting the feeling, getting the way the light hits the person. These pieces are like the blues. I like catching the moment, catching the light, and the way it plays out. She says, I go with my intuition, and it's always about looking at lines and the quality of movement. It's about seeking energy and breath and light. And she said the image is just always moving, even when you're standing still. And we can kind of see that in this piece, where even though, we know it's a still work, the clouds appear to be kind of, moving. As you say, it kind of hovers and gives you that sense of still that there's movement in it. And it's brilliant. She is absolutely brilliant in using this type of photography. I mean, we have a tendency to look at things that are double exposed or that are kind of fuzzy as, maybe not the way to go with photography, but she takes this and just uses it in such a brilliant way. And then, she not only, did she use James Baldwin, but she had access to a lot of famous people, because her husband was a musician, a well-known musician. And so they would travel, and so she would have access to all of these different people, and she would just take these pictures kind of like off the cuff, and then take them back to the studio and play with them. And, she spoke a lot about using this style as a statement about how Black people are perceived, and how visually, we're never ever quite prominent. We're just kind of in the shadows. We work hard to be seen, and so it's wondrous. I absolutely love this piece.
And I love that quote that you used, because of course she did photographs of some very famous musicians as well. She did photographs of Grace Jones, yes, and Nina Simone, Alice Coltrane, so that sort of continuum between music and photography is really, really important for her. It's interesting. You and I both saw the Gordon Parks exhibit that was down in Stanford last week, and there's a piece that she does that really reminds me of a Gordon Parks piece. There's this Gordon Parks piece that's kind of like the Black American Gothic. Shows a woman holding a broom and a mop in front of an American flag. If you look at one of her photographs, there's a Black man standing in front of a building. Have you seen that one? It really reminds me.
I have, yes.
His influence on her work as well. It's very, very interesting work.
And she actually did work with him early on in her career. So
yeah, clearly an important influence for her. Yes. But again, I like the moodiness of this piece. It's really nice.
I always want to jump in and say, I think it's really interesting. This is done in '79, when James Baldwin's still alive. But he continues to be a towering presence. I think one of the most prominent writers of the 20th century.
Absolutely.
So this continues to resonate very much today.
Ooh, that was so nourishing. Thank you so much for all of the research that you did, and for letting us see it in the way that, yeah, with all that information, I really appreciate it. So the next piece, if we're ready to move on to the next piece, I think it's Dimitri's favorite. All right, let's go for it. Charlie and Dimitri, tell us more about this piece. And I'm wondering what folks are thinking as well, what folks are seeing. Let us know in the chat.
Well,
yeah, I would really.
I'm gonna try to find that link for the. I've already put the link of her other photo. That article has it, but I'll put in the link for the Gordon Parks as well.
Got it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Charlie.
Awesome. Yeah, this piece, it's just my favorite. There's so many Barkley Hendricks images that I absolutely love, but he did this whole series where he's showing his mastery of color theory by using this minimal color palette of white. But as we look closely to, at the close, we realize that the white, just like the black and, the brown of the skin, it is nuanced. It's so many different colors that he mixes in to give us this depth and breadth. So really showing his mastery of color theory. And for me with this photo, this painting, just what I love is the mood, the attitude. I mean, he painted this. He created this and the figures are life size, just so folks understand. We're looking at this little screen right now, but they're all life size. So they're really confronting you if you're standing in front of this massive, massive canvas right here, 65 inches by 83 inches. So not small by any means. And, one of the things that I just really love is that all of the figures are looking in different directions. There's just like this cool, they're not really that concerned with us, right? They're the woman in the center of the image is looking at us, but I don't know that she's looking at our direction, but I don't know that she's really looking at us or really caring about us so much. And in the last decade, so many artists of African descent have been interested in the concept of the gaze. Initially we're talking about the white gaze, how white America in particular looks at Blackness and projects its own ideas upon that body without the body having agency for itself, for the person within that body. And then more recently, we've been talking about the Black gaze and what does it mean to live outside of the world of the white gaze and to just to own your own destiny. And this is decades before those conversations were happening, that Barkley Hendricks was already wrestling with this. So many of the subjects are people that he actually knows, that have actually visited his studio. And for me, though, even though with all the subjects, I think first I looked at the man with the rose tinted glasses. I think something about the color of those glasses draws your eye in. But then as I started kind of bouncing around, I noticed that the woman at center with the suit on is really the center of this image. And her body double is the nude. If you look, they're wearing the same earrings. They've got the same makeup on. It's the same woman. And what's happening, I don't know. That's what I love about Barkley Hendricks. He's capturing the mood, the attitude of the 1970s. But he's leaving so much for us to guess. We don't know what's happening. And in fact, I don't even know that we're really invited into this scene entirely. Charlie?
Yeah, there's a P. Fox. If P could tell us their first name, I'd be happy to acknowledge that. But P. Fox says, first impression reminding me of Rapid Patty. Patrick,
Patry.
thank you, Patrick, says, reminding me of rap video with fully clothed in juxtaposition to and bare body, agency in the gaze, who's racial, gendered, question mark. Yeah, I mean, those are great comments. You know, I read one comment about this particular work that it sort of reminded them of Manet's Luncheon on the Grass, where you have these two, well, there's one naked woman, one partially clothed woman, and the men are completely clothed. So it's a little bit of a play on that, where you do have this odd juxtaposition of roles. And I think he plays with that, you know, sort of makes a meta play of it as well, because that central character is both clothed and unclothed. And I think that gives us a lot to think about. And of course, this piece was in the exhibit Soul of a Nation that a lot of us saw over at not the Legion, but the De Young here in San Francisco. And it is just an enormous piece. It really is so imposing when you look at it. But from an aesthetic point, one of the things I really love about it is, you know, it is this, as Dimitri pointed out, this very, very subdued palette. And yet, if you look at the sunglasses on the right, and then you look at her lipstick in the middle, and then you look at the earring to the left of her, you know, there is this, it just takes you across the painting in a really beautiful and subtle way. You know, one thing that I didn't know about him is that he really started off as a photographer, and he studied with Walker Evans, which I think is really interesting, because a lot of his paintings really do have a photographic quality to them. And it turns out that he likes to think of his camera as a mechanical sketchbook. That's the term that he himself uses, that he walks around, he takes all these photos, just like someone might sketch before they're going to paint. And I think that was really interesting to me. That I didn't know that about him, that's really where he started. And to have someone like Walker Evans, who does have this kind of, for me, Walker Evans, he's a brilliant photographer, but in some ways has this very sterile view. You know, you use that term, you're not sure if you're really invited in here or not. It has that same view. It has that kind of distance that a camera might bring to a situation. There are obviously photographers that bring you in very, very carefully, but here there is a certain distance to it. I think it's a really interesting combination of aesthetic choices that he's made here.
Yeah, I think also just kind of going back to the comment about, the unclothed woman. I love that you brought in,
Manet,
the image. Yeah, the Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe.
Right. Luncheon on the grass. Right?
Lunch on the grass. Yeah. So, it's this, for me, it's like, in a rap video, the nudity is very much focused on a male gaze and a male fantasy. I think what he's successfully doing here is she's standing proud within her nudity, and her nudity is not for our display. Very much like, oh my gosh, why am I thinking Billie Zangewa's work, where she often employs nudity of her own body. There was an exhibition recently had, and then sometimes he is often nude in his own paintings as well, and it's really not for our consumption. So it's a very different view of nudity than what you would see in like a stereotypical hip hop video, like Sir Mix-a-Lot's video, infamous video, for example. It's not for the male gaze. It is not even a sexualized view of the male, the nude body. It's really just it's going back to like classical art, I think, in so many ways, like classical Greco-Roman art, where the body is to be appreciated, not to be sexualized.
Yeah, I just think it's a really interesting aesthetic choice. White on white background,
Yeah.
clothes, and so what it does is it makes the black skin really stand out, and of course what he's getting is different tonalities of the black skin as well. So it's really, I wish if you get a chance to see this piece, go, because it's big, it's impressive. You can't help but get gobsmacked by it. We had a piece of his at MOAD, I want to say 2-3 years ago, that I really, Hey Lottie Mama.
Yeah, with the gold leaf.
Yeah, which had the gold leaf in the background. And, that was also a piece that was just so great to stand in front of, because its size really takes you in. And of course, this one is it's much larger, in fact.
All right. And we have, this is kind of all white. And then moving on to the dark and black painting here. And let's listen to the music that Dimitri chose for it.
Many suggestions and documents written, many directions for the aid that was given. They gave us pieces of silver and pieces of gold. Tell me who'll pay reparations on my soul.
Oh, I hope you talk a little bit about Gil Scott-Heron too, with this piece.
I do. I'll jump in there. I think is Rodney with me on this one, or is that Charlie also?
It's me.
It's Charlie.
I think it's Charlie.
Yeah. So I just quickly, Gil Scott-Heron. I think everyone, whether you really know who Gil Scott-Heron is or not, has heard the term "the revolution will not be televised." That is his, arguably most famous poem, song. I don't know what you call it. He mixes the song, the singing with the poetry. But this track for me is one of my favorites, actually, and I think it's underappreciated. Who will pay reparations on my soul? And both tracks are actually from his debut album in 1972, A New Black Poet, Small Talk at 125th and Lenox, which was recorded live at that spot in front of a live audience. And just for me, that piece really fits well with David Hammons, who, even though he says he's not a political artist or he's not trying to convey a political message, I think anytime you include images of the American flag, it's automatically political, right? Because it is a symbol of political belief, not just of nationhood, but there's a statement, and particularly when you juxtapose, the flag against Blackness. Charlie, do you want to add some stuff to this? Because I don't want to take it over.
I think this piece, for me, the most interesting thing about this piece is the title, which is Black First, America Second, America Second, which I think is really interesting. I'm sure when we were kids, we all played that game of, I belong to the universe, and then I belong to the earth, and then and so you break down sort of like the order that you identify yourself, and it's interesting because here you have sort of a duality, Black first, America second, so is he saying I identify as a Black man first and then as American second? Yes, but he's also saying that in the eyes of America, that, for example, the idea of equality is, no, you're a Black person first, you're an American second. Mm-hmm. You don't have the same sort of rights as an American because you're a Black person first. So excuse me. So he's playing with that duality, which I think is really interesting. And then, of course, the thing that a lot of you might not know about him is one of the things is his technique or his method of the way he does his art is he basically body paints. He puts some sort of margarine or something like that on his body, and then uses various inks or tones to use his body onto that. And what he's done in this particular piece is he's put himself twice onto that. We looked at another piece of his that I thought was a really interesting piece, where you see that hands over an admissions door, where you see that Black hands are not allowed into the admissions office. So he uses that technique, and he himself says he's not the first person to use this. Jasper Johns and Rauschenberg and even Yves Klein in France used to have models painted, and then they throw themselves onto the canvas. So he's not using a technique, but he knows that, and he says that he still wants to use his body as part of that art aesthetic. And then political, not political, the American flag, and this idea of Are they hanging on to the flag for dear life? Are they being suffocated by the flag? There are all these dualities that you can read from this work. So it's powerful work.
Yeah, I want to also just kind of add the figures, if we can. I don't know if folks can really see it, but there's the two figures. The one that's towards the bottom is really screaming out. If you look closely, it's I think it's a little hard to see that. And there we go. Perfect, Sade. Look at that. And the other one is a lot more peaceful. It's happy. So there's also this other duality of, folks having different experiences. The other thing is, this flag, are they draped in it? Is it covering them up? Are they drowning in it? Like what is going on with the flag because of the way that it, kind of envelops their body? It's behind them, but it's also simultaneously in front of them. So I think, I love Hammonds. He's one of my favorite artists of all time. And has just been just such a key figure in contemporary art. I think every contemporary African-American artist, at least, if not beyond African-American artists, is inspired by Hammonds. I mean, the work that he's created is so deep, and then he's not necessarily, he doesn't commit himself to just using one format. So even though we're doing these body prints on here, he does sculpture, he does installation, he does everything.
Yeah, there's some also comments. It says, Sherry says, in my household, we now think of Juneteenth as Independence Day. Patri says, in the eyes of the world, Blacks are often taken for anything anywhere else, but not U.S. citizens. And then Patri also asks, any thoughts on the shadowing of the stars? Dimitri, do you have any thoughts on that? I didn't.
I need to. Can we go back out today? I can't.
Yeah.
I'm not really seeing that.
I'm
I think.
kind of seeing
I
it
see
over
there.
here. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's also adding depth. I don't know that because we see the shadow at the bottom of the flag, so I'm just assuming he's carrying that up to give it depth, so it's not flat.
Yeah, I don't know if there's message to that or if it's technique, or maybe it's both. I don't know.
Yeah, he does. He also doesn't give us anything. He's like,
no.
Here's a piece. Here's the title. Do it with what you may, which I love. I love that.
Yes. Oh, thank you. And last week we kind of noticed that there was like a black and white theme going, and then I really like this how you put the images together, Dimitri, and the next piece being Aida Mulune's work, and let's look at it. The white suit and the flag, and now we're seeing. Oof, that is such a good pairing, Dimitri. If you want to tell us about the sound pairing that you did, the idea behind it, and we'll talk about Aida Mulune's work. Yeah, I know. I mean, Anthony, I love Jill Scott. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same thing with Anthony, right? I love Jill Scott. I think she's just amazing. She's from Philadelphia. And, she started off as a poet, and she still remains a poet in addition to singer and actor. I don't know. She does all kinds of stuff, right? Producer. But really, when I saw this image, I was really battling between this woman and the hands, and I won't go into that. And it felt very clear because Womanifesto is about womanhood, especially as a Black woman, and really thinking about the projections that men tend to put upon a woman's body. And I encourage folks to listen to that whole track. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, thank you I'd never heard of it. I've never heard that until you pair this with this. And I want to say, so Ida Muluna in this image is connecting her style to Ethiopian. She's an Ethiopian born artist and connecting her style to the Ethiopian traditional way of adorning a face, adorning the body, the face painting that she's doing on one of the subjects. She started out with being a journalistic photographer, a well-traveled photographer. Also, I mean, she lived in Yemen, in England, in Canada, and she spent some time in she spent quite a lot of time in Canada, and that's when she picked up the camera when she was a high school student. I mean, to this day, she talks about her experience as a high school student picking up a camera and learning some of the techniques that she still uses. And she went to school. She's a Howard graduate in the U.S., and she pursued journalistic photography, documentary photography, which kind of started to lead her into this path of looking to Africa for contemporary art. And she urges folks to look at African contemporary art in every canon that she gets a chance to do that. And in this one, she is particularly talking about women of Addis Ababa, her birthplace, Addis Ababa, of the gender roles and the gender expectations and what is expected of her and of the subject in this, and also being managing kind of the modern day womanhood. And so in her, how I see it is, all the things that are pulling us aside, are these hands supporting us? Are these hands kind of twisting this subject? Are they adorning this subject? What are they doing? Also, the colors aesthetically, if we look at it, it almost reminds me of hands that are dipped in blood, red like blood. So yeah, there's not much that she says about these pieces, which are 99, part of 99, a series of 99. And this is part 7, and there are multiple of them. And this one in particular is very current to me with issues that are affecting and the discussions that are going around about or the women's body and Black women's body specifically, the African women's body specifically. Yeah. Any thoughts?
Well, I was just going to interject also. This piece is fascinating for me, number one, because of the contrast of colors. I mean, my God, the stark white and then this vivid red and then the black down the center of the face. I'm completely intrigued with this piece. I did find a statement by her, and she says, I painted her body white because for me, living in this city we call Addis Ababa, we don't need to fantasize about going to the inferno. And I'm assuming when she says inferno that she means hell. She says, I have seen and experienced enough things to really make me question humanity. I have realized that in order to get ahead here, many people wear masks in order to protect their future. But while doing this, the reality is that I have seen the various atrocities and the great lengths that many will go to in order to maintain their success. And so with that in mind, for me, the red hands symbolize the guilt associated with the thirst for upward mobility. I was floored.
Yes.
I read
wow.
that. It just took on a whole different context for me. These red stained hands, the guilt of people, dehumanizing others for their upward mobility. Just wow. Wow.
Lucri said that, yeah, I agree with Dimitri. You and the quote, seriously, thank you for that. Yeah, wow. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Well, we've seen someone in whiteface. We have an unfortunate tradition in our country of blackface, and she's kind of turning it on its head. So I find that interesting.
Yeah. It's interesting because she's very Afrocentric in the way that her work is very centralized and sourced from her African contemporary art and African art in general. And we have in Ethiopia, we have groups that adorn their face in white, and do dots on their face and many other adornments in the face. And so for me, that is contemporary. That is still to this day that we have people that are doing that. The group that, so to think of that being a contemporary in itself, and for this to be contemporary translation or iteration of itself is very interesting to me. Yeah.
I mean, my comments really from an American cultural perspective, and I understanding that this is actually an African artist.
Yeah.
But just how we use our own cultural lens to perceive things.
Yeah, true. Absolutely. Yeah. All right.
There is a comment from Patri that says, FYI, concert theater in Ghana uses blackface.
Oh. Interesting. Okay. All right, moving on to this next piece. Rodney, I think we got this one, don't we?
I'm happy to talk about it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I think I wasn't one of the people listed, but
okay, no problem at all. But I know I wanted the people. Yeah, what are folks thinking about this image?
Well, I am going to chime in. And having not done any research.
Yeah, don't worry.
But no, I think, and I like that idea of talking about things just from what you perceived looking at it.
Yes.
And it's like this. It's not even a triple image, right? It's this multiple image, maybe different sides of a person. In like, what is the mood of this, right? It's to me a very sardonic mood, but we're seeing this person from all these different perspectives. That's kind of what I get from it. And then we're really looking at the face. Our eyes are drawn to his eyes, to his face, and then the other aspects of him just kind of fade away.
Rodney, I'm curious, when you're looking at the person's face or the eyes, are your eyes able to rest on a pair of eyes? No,
it really isn't. It's very, it's very kind of, I'd say, a disturbing image in the sense that, it's not something you can just placidly look on. Yeah. Unlike, most art is not going to have that impact on you. But this one, it's very intriguing. Like you really want, you kind of want to look more deeply at it to better understand, like, who is this guy? What's going on with him?
Right. So, so this started as the Jerome Project. So this style of Titus Kaphari's work started with the Jerome's Project, and Jerome is his father's first name, and it represents so he was searching for his father, right? He was researching his father and his father's prison record, and he came across mugshots of nearly 100 men who shared his father's name. He began researching these 99 other Jeromes and interviewing them and investigating their personal histories. And then he used their mugshots, and he's kind of in general fascinated by mugshots anyway, because he, when they started, they were artistic, aesthetical photography. Like they didn't look as they're not very, they used to not to be very functional. They were photos that were taken away by professional photographers, and they had some aesthetic quality. And so and to begin with, he was fascinated by that anyway. And then he took that, he took those and then blurred and confused their identity. So he layered them so that they ultimately became illegible. So you can't really decipher whose image you're looking at. And what he was also doing was this first. It was on, he would dip these images in gold like paint, and they were half kind of asphalt looking, kind of like that, and half of them would be dipped in gold. So I would really encourage folks to look at some of his other work. Then later on, what he did is as urgently as we were sort of as a nation kind of pulsing with so much injustice that were taking young Black men away from us, he kind of redirected that, and he made chalk on asphalt paper, drawing Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, and Walter Scott. So the images that you're looking at are these kids, Eric Garner, these folks, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, and Walter Scott, put all together and blurred. And his choice of material also tells us that he's thinking about the body drawings, the police body drawings that are done around the corpse and in the street. And it kind of, it lets us look at the dead, but it brings some, they're almost alive. They're looking at us. They're gazing right back at us, almost in a confused, in a really delusional way. It makes me kind of like, oh my God, I don't know who to look at. And it kind of brings them back to life, and it makes it kind of confrontational for us. By the way, none of them were armed. They were unarmed men, boys, and none of their killers convicted of murder. So just thinking about these boys and men who, he met that urgency of wanting to portray this image in 2015, and we're looking at an image of folks that are no longer alive, but have such life looking at us. Yeah, any thoughts?
Well, we've had a lot of Kafar's work, I want to say probably 3-4 years ago again. And his stuff is always very powerful, and the materials that he's using, he's very deliberate about the materials that he's using. He uses things like tar, to represent being tarred and feathered, or, he's very specific. As I recall, he was using molasses, wasn't he, Dimitri, in some of his works, or it's to sort of represent materials that were used in the slave trade, right? Isn't that?
I don't recall him using molasses, but that doesn't mean that's not.
Yeah, very, very strong, powerful work, and the eyes are always so important. You see the tar would be lifted up higher and higher across these various men's faces. It was very powerful work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think also just, I don't know what asphalt paper is, Sherry. That's a really good question. But whatever it is, I'm assuming it's made out of asphalt in some kind of way. And then also for him to be using this chalk specifically, to Charlie's point, to be thinking about, chalk outlines for these dead bodies that are lying on the asphalt. Yeah, you're right. That's right. I think Patri has it correct. Yeah, it's used in roofing. That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, also just to go to the track, we didn't talk about Kedron Bryant's song that came out when he was 12 and went viral on social media first, following the death of, or the murder of George Floyd. So, we're making these connections. Titus Kaphar made this in 2015. 5 years later, this same exact issue was coming up. And, both of them are responding to a specific unarmed person's death at the hands of police.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts before we move on?
Just to say,
Yeah.
Having given my thoughts about this without knowing anything about it, it was great to get that explanation today. And I think the thing I come away with is this piece has a great deal of humanity.
Mm,
And when you talk about a mugshot, it's something that really deprives people of humanity.
that's true.
So he's really succeeded in turning that around.
You know what, Ronnie? I kind of went into a rabbit hole looking at mugshots also from the past, like the artistic ones, the ones that didn't, they had some dignity, like it the images had some dignity in those. And so yeah, anyway, yeah, looking at this. All right. Again, I think the color connection, I'm seeing it, Dimitri.
Lucretia is back with
Lucretia
us.
is back, and I see it. I see it.
Yeah, so I'll just go off by talking about the song Michael Kiwanuka. Also, I think that's from 2020. Do not quote me if I get that wrong, but I know it's just from the last couple of years. So again, bringing music that's contemporary. And Michael Kiwanuka's family is originally from Uganda, but they migrated to the UK after during the reign of Idi Amin. And Michael Kiwanuka is talking about his first debut album was very folk based music, and so for a second one he wanted to he in lots of his interviews he was talking about I know I'm in England. There's a smaller population of Black folks here, but every time he was at his concert, he was like, I wish there was more Black people in the audience. So for his second album, he decided to talk about issues that he's faced, not just in the UK, but issues around the world. And so he decided to be political with it and take a risk. But fortunately, it did not make him fall away into obscurity. It actually gave him more credibility to do it. So anyway, that's Kiwanuka and the song. But obviously, Black men in a white world, it also has a very strong visual presence with this work. And now Lucretia is going to take us on a deep journey. I know it. I can feel it.
No. This piece was, I don't know, it became really personal for me, and I'll kind of get into that. But I just wanted to say that the words that he uses are from two quotations. One from Zora Neale Hurston's "How It Feels to Be Colored Me," and that's the first two, I believe, yes. And then the last two, the Black on Black images, uses a quotation from Ralph Ellison's prologue in his book, The Invisible Man. And it says, I am an invisible man. No, I'm not a spook like those who haunted Edgar Allan Poe, nor am I one of your Hollywood movie ectoplasms. I am a man of substance, of flesh and bone, fiber and liquids, and I might even be said to possess a mind. I am invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me. Like the bodiless heads you see sometimes in circus sideshows, it is as though I have been surrounded by mirrors of hard, distorting glass. When they approach me, they see only themselves or figments of their imagination. So that's where this came from. And he, using the technique that he uses, he takes advantage of the textures and the embossments that are possible with the etching and with the aquatint. And so it creates this kind of densely layered surface. And as he's working with it, the words become less and less intelligible until they just kind of become this, this blob of things. And I kind of like Sade went down a rabbit hole as I'm looking at this, and I'm seeing these words repeated over and over and over again. And then I began to just kind of, think about my own self, as a Black person in this world. And so my perceptions, first of all, I was just like, okay, this has become like a word portrait of what it's like to be Black in America. And it's very simple. It's deceptively simple, actually. But it makes a really profound statement on racism in America. The backdrop of white supremacy, how I feel when I'm in white spaces, when I go to some place and I'm the only Black face, and how I suddenly, against that background become, this very present person. Then as the wording is starting to kind of, meld together, it just reminded me of the messiness of trying to maintain humanity in the face of all of these inhumane acts that are perpetrated against Black people. It's kind of like the dichotomy of being visible and invisible at the same time, and deciding on which is the lesser of two evils, to be present and visible and possibly having all of these horrible things happen, or to be invisible and to just go through life as this kind of non-entity. So it just this piece really became heavy as the more and more I read these words. I do not always feel colored. I do not always feel colored. I'm just like, oh my gosh, and then seeing this stark Blackness against the white, it really just spoke to just the whole racist system.
I just want to jump in and say that I saw, I guess, another, it's a different quote, but this is another Ligon piece that's like this at the Cincinnati Art Museum. And it's real interesting to think about which of these pieces that we like to talk about are getting into these other museums. And we're seeing this as we're traveling around the Midwest. And having heard you, Lucretia, talk about this earlier, I tried to read the whole thing, and it's hard, and it just makes you realize how racism obscures our ability to hear the message. So I learned from hearing your interpretation of this.
Wow, Lucretia, that was, yes. I was just like, she's speaking for many of us right now. I'm just gonna press mute and just sit here. Thank you so much. And next piece is, I think Rodney and I have this one.
They told me put my hands up behind my head. I think you got the wrong one. I'm sick and tired of running. I've been searching where the love went. I've been looking for the love, and they told me if I move, they gon' shoot me dead. But I think I'm about to go to run. I've been waiting on the summer, so looking back and wondering.
I urge folks to listen to the lyrics of this song, and if possible, and I'll send the link to the video also for the participants that are on Zoom. I'll send you the link to the video of the music also. It's a really, really beautifully done, and also such an impactful and heavy video to watch as well. So yeah, I would love for folks to see that. Yeah, Dimitri, you want to say a little bit about the music before I move on to the art, or you want me to go straight to the art?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say something real quick. This is
Okay.
a song by the group The Dinner Party, which is made up of Kumasi Washington, Terrace Martin, Robert Glasper, and then DJ. Oh my God, which DJ? Okay, sorry, look it up. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on that real quick. But anyway, it's one of those songs where when I first heard it, I was like, oh, this is the jam. This is making me feel really good, right? It feels like a summertime fun song. And then the lyrics start to enter your ear, and then you start to realize that it's someone being chased by the police and them telling him to put his hands above his head or else he'll be shot dead. Mm-hmm. And so the juxtaposition of that, for me, it's one of the most brilliant songs of all time, because they're capturing that feel of a worry-free summer, which I think is when we think about folks who have been killed, oftentimes, thinking about Tamir Rice, for example, having fun in the park playing with his toy gun by himself. And then, next thing you know, his life is tragically taken. I think that track really captures that sense of, the desire for freedom, just to exist and live your best happy life. But then, always having to be worried in the background that, your life could be taken because of a misunderstanding.
Yeah, definitely. And Carrie Mae Weems, I think, as we know her as a photographer, video installation artist, she kind of gives us a window into familial relationships, sexism, classism, and power. And then here in this one, she also takes us to a place where Dimitri just talked about the music. And if I were to paint the music, I think it would look something like this, for example. And that's the kind of, she's painting that agony and that sadness, that confusion, that blurriness that, that we see. She's using her photography to show us that. And in her quote, she says that I could not lead you to anything, but I hope that my work provokes critical inquiry. And if my work encourages you to ask, what is that? And what does that mean? Then I think I have done my job. And I think in this one, she doesn't particularly spell everything out, but we know what it is. And, majority of the young men, the boys that we know that have been murdered by the police have one or two things in common. But one thing that we know is also this hoodie and the hat. And she, on purpose, she makes it blurry so that it could be anybody. It could be anybody or any of the boys or any of the men. And so, this is such a powerful piece. I love it. I look at it as a painting as well. For some reason, my eyes just see a painting as opposed to photography. And I think that's one of the best qualities of well-rendered photography also is to be able to kind of cross genres and mediums. So yeah. Any other thoughts?
Yeah. I think this is a piece that different people could see in different ways that, I immediately thought of Trayvon Martin, and I think I would expect that's what Carrie Mae Weems was. I think she was probably directly commenting on that. But another person might see this and even think it wasn't a Black man. It could be anybody. and it just makes us think about, to me, like Trayvon Martin, he has no idea that all of us know his name. He didn't live to this all happened after he died. The same thing with George Floyd. I had dinner the other night with a friend who said, if you could tell George Floyd, what happened after he died, it would just blow his mind. But of course, this isn't what either one of them wanted, to be these figures of great renown. So this image really helps me think about that. And I think different people will go to different places. It helps us meditate on what's going on, as the title of one of the past pieces we were talking about is saying. Very powerful. And also know that Carrie Mae Weems, like as a photographer, she has done series that show blurred faces. Particularly, she showed older women, women of the arts of the 50s, 60s, whose memories have not been well remembered, or she thinks we're not really looking at them, thinking about them in detail. So it's a very powerful effect.
And
Yeah,
Rodney, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say, Sherry put into the comments, the face is ghost-like or even alien-like. And I think, that's one of the powerful things is, and also going off of what Rodney says, your perception may be different. So it's also making you question, like, what your initial perceptions of a person or a thing are, because, right, we make an assessment of someone within the first couple of seconds. It's built into our DNA. We can't help it. But it's also the way that we think is also built upon, the images that we are given, through society, so you start to realize, like, there's a look of a person who's good and kind. There's a look of a person who's evil. Like, it's even going to the baby test from the 50s, where they had the white baby doll and the black baby doll. We can't, no matter, even Black folks have these perceptions, right? Because white supremacy is just built into our society and our way of thinking. It's ingrained in us, and we have to undo it for ourselves. So I think, she's doing this really great job at, by just giving us so little information, making us think about that. Who do I perceive this person to be? Are they a good person? Are they a bad person? More importantly, are they a threat? Or there's someone to not be worried about? And with this little bit of information, we have to go on it. She's also making us think of like a night vision camera, or like your Ring camera at night, picking up someone who's at your front door.
That was exactly what my mind went to. It's so funny that you mentioned it, Dimitri. Like when I looked at this, that's what I kept. This is kind of like the next door image that people would post of somebody that they deem is unsafe or danger. And there's so much speculation about that person. Comment after comment. Don't go downloading that app. It's evil. But anyway. So, but I'm just saying though, like, this is also making me look much like those images, right? Like looking closer at the person. It makes me gravitate toward it and kind of figure out, who is this? What do they look like? So I think the blurriness has another purpose as well, is to figure out, kind of to draw us closer to the person that does not seem warm, or even the color of it is just blue and cold and cool. And so, just makes us look closer. And it's such a strong piece. I love it. Yeah, all right. Look at us being like super on time.
There is a comment from Sherry that says, it
Sherry.
makes me very sad that anyone is looked at so anonymously, and breaks my heart that too many cops don't see a living, loving, important human.
Yeah. Agreed. All right, our last piece. Thank you for that comment, Sherry. Hey, we have to clap for the person who brought Roberta Flack to this piece. Please tell us about this piece.
Is Lucretia going to talk about the music?
Are you gonna?
Please.
Oh, I thought you were gonna talk about the music.
I mean, the only thing that I could say is that I'm just going to repeat what I told you all. Yes, I love Roberta Flack too, like Charlie says. I knew this song first from Donny Hathaway, who was a lifelong collaborator with Roberta Flack. So for me, I was just, I wasn't around in the early 70s. I wasn't born yet. So I didn't realize that this was Roberta Flack's song first, which makes total sense. And I've been listening to it incessantly over and over. Great choice. This was brought to it. This pairing was brought to us by Lucretia.
Yes.
So when I heard this, the words just, for me, just so matched what I was seeing in this, this piece, that these are trying times. And a lot of the work that Ronnie Goodman did pertained to life as we know it now and has been for so long. He addressed his position as a Black man who had experienced houselessness and who dealt with addiction and who dealt with incarceration and all of these kinds of struggles. And it's so funny because when I look at this piece, I see it as a piece that is very much revolutionary in what it's saying. It has all of these things about homelessness, how if we just would all love one another, we could get rid of so many of these things that we're dealing with, which is exactly what the song was saying. And so it was just a perfect match. Anyway, he kind of, considered himself as a self-taught artist, even though he did study with various people in the time that he was incarcerated. He actually learned to read and write when he was in prison. And so, he was kind of like this late bloomer of sorts. Thank you, today. I actually, because I was struggling to see the words on there, but yeah, it talks about freedom. It talks about being silent no more, and at the bottom part of it, and I'm not sure if you guys can see this or if this is my eyes playing tricks on me, but it looks like there is a person that has the two American flags used kind of like as a row, like you're in a boat, like you're rowing with it. And I just thought, that is amazing. It's pretty amazing. But it talks about also trying to rebirth, having a regeneration and changing the things that we are facing today. And so it's a striking piece. I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm so excited about this piece. And I'm even more excited about his life story because it speaks so much to the work that he did. So he was different from other incarcerated artists in that he would focus on his environment and he would draw on these deep reserves of focus and curiosity while he was in prison, while most incarcerated artists preferred not to draw, paint, their environment because of the environment that they were in. But he used this to speak to the issues of Black men being imprisoned at such a high rate other than other people. And so then when he got out, he became homeless. And so he would speak about that. But while he was in prison, he actually would produce a lot of the San Francisco Bay View, and he published it under different names. He published it under Hard Bricks, he published it under JCat and under Bootzilla. So if you ever saw any of those cartoons, that was Ronnie Goodman. He would address homelessness but he didn't want to be a part of any kind of protest because he didn't want to bring attention to himself. He didn't want to risk being reincarcerated, for being a part of these things. And so this was also kind of his way of dealing with that, of being a part of the protest, but not being a part of the protest. So he struggled with drug addiction, and for long periods of time, his addiction really kind of prevented him from doing this type of work. He also damaged, of course, he damaged lots of relationships with his family, with his friends. And, unfortunately, his artistry, he was taken from us much too soon because he actually died in 2020, just recently. And he died in his homeless encampment on 16th and Cap Street. And so it's just, his whole life was just kind of this, I hate to say tragic, but it was very tragic. But out of the tragedy came these wonderful works of art.
Yeah, and I don't know if, because you cut out for a couple seconds there, if you specifically said that this was San Francisco, and he was based in San Francisco.
Yes.
And and I just want to draw attention, we've got if you've been to San Francisco, if you are in San Francisco, the Ferry Building and those palm trees that are around it, like, exactly where he's at on the Embarcadero from this image. And I'm just getting into printmaking right now, but the style of his etching is just absolutely freaking brilliant. I have to add.
Yeah, for me, since I'm traveling, seeing that Ferry Building, just like, it's always nice to see images of San Francisco, and then to see us in this context, the context of protest and of the peace movement. It's kind of us at our best. And maybe the location is Embarcadero Plaza, which used to have a different name.
What was it, Rodney?
Well, there was a name of a person, Justin Herman Plaza.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. Who,
That's right.
who was the redevelopment person who destroyed the Fillmore, basically. So it's an interesting setting, but yeah, it is nice to see our city portrayed as a place where these values emanate from. It's something that we tell people as we travel around the Midwest that we're from San Francisco. And I always kind of look to see what their reactions are.
Me too.
I do have a sense of being somewhat behind enemy lines right now. Now I have a question about this. Is he the trumpet player? Is that a self-portrait? Or do we know who the trumpet player is?
Looks like Miles Davis to me.
Miles,
Miles Davis. Yeah.
I should know
that's
that.
what I was thinking. Yeah.
Look at that hair. It's late Miles Davis, like in the 70s, like I'm sorry, in the 80s, kind of.
Yeah, you wore those suits. I should know that. I'm a trumpet player myself, and I do love Miles Davis.
Sure, tells you, Rodney, be safe traveling behind us.
Oh, it's funny, but
but
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, what you find is that we've been in rural areas, and the rural areas really are behind enemy lines. But the cities, Cincinnati, I expect in Chicago for sure, and since in St. Louis is where we are now, I think a lot of those places do share our values.
Yeah.
I was just going to also bring out that there is, for me, in this piece, just a symbol of hope, because they have the two African figures, which are actually fertility and symbolize new birth and new life. And so, it's like, yes, all of this is going on, but there is hope, and I think I've already said it, and that love is the answer.
Yeah. This is such a good piece, and what a great piece to end our conversation today. And thank you, folks, for staying with us and for joining our conversation. There are many ways of supporting us, and by merely showing up to our events, you're supporting us big time. And we have many online programs as well as in person, and come and see our exhibitions. Also, we have 5 exhibitions right now, and thank you so much to Dimitri for putting all of this together, for Charlie, Rodney, and Lucreza for just doing such an amazing job with the research, and also we have such a great time. We really like each other, so that helps. And so I will see you all in a month. We'll have a program in August, and we will send a registration link to everyone that have attended today, and also be on the lookout to our newsletter. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, and I'll see you on the other side.
Okay.